Hi there, and welcome back to Books with Beth. Today we will be discussing the book Shadow and Bone. I know, I'm pretty late to the discussion, but it was what I wanted to make, so I hope you'll enjoy the video anyway. And if you do, consider liking and subscribing. Now, on to the review. Just a quick warning though, there will be spoilers up ahead. In the prologue, we meet two children who we later know to be Alina and Mal. Their friendship was nice in the beginning, but I had hoped that the author could refrain from making it into any other kind of ship. Needless to say, these hopes and dreams were later completely dashed. But just seeing them together within the prologue, playing, chatting, and having fun, I thought they were really cute. They also get tested to see if they are Grisha, which are humans who can manipulate the science around them, similar to magic. But they don't show the result in the prologue. However, in Chapter 1, the crowded roads, rolling fields, and abandoned farms make it clear that they are not in a luxurious Grisha school. Mal flirts with girls, pissing Alina off, and we come to find out that she's in love with him, because, of course she is. The Darkling, one of the most powerful Grisha, nearly runs her over, as I am sure Darkling stans are asking for on Twitter. Not that I've checked or anything. On that note, though, I have made a Twitter account, and I'll be leaving it down in the description. Feel free to follow me for a glimpse into my life, as well as live updates on my reading and reviewing. Then we meet Alexei. Despite his small and rather short-lived role, he might be the best character in this whole book, apart from Genya. Finally, upon my second read-through, where I took notes, I noticed that there was a lot of foreshadowing in this chapter. The Mal and Alina thing, as well as when one of their peers says the current Darkling is just as bad as the one who created the Shadowfold. No one believes her, of course, because obviously they're all big brain boys, and she's a silly tinfoil hat wearer who probably believes that the government is run by lizard people or something. Maybe that wouldn't be so far off though, since corporalki control bodies. So what's stopping them from shapeshifting? Mal also says, "You know I'd be lost without you," as if he's not a literal tracker. In any case, we'll see how all this becomes relevant later on. Chapter 2. They enter the fold, where they're attacked by hundreds of Volcra. Alexei dies, unfortunately. It's not showed explicitly. He's carried into the dark by the Volcra, so here's a guess. Maybe he'll end up turning into a Volcra that Alina has to face later on. Then, as a Volcra is about to kill Alina, Mal joins the fight and helps her. Sadly, he gets slashed by Volcra talons and loses a lot of blood. But then light suddenly surrounds them, saving them from the Volcra. They later find out that this light actually came from Alina. So I guess we could call this an enlightening discovery. Chapter 3. Alina is taken to the Black Grisha tent for a court session thing. She describes the Darkling as having a sharp, beautiful face, a shock of thick black hair, and clear grey eyes that glimmered like quartz. Like, wow. Way to feel horny while your best friend might be dead. During the trial, Senior Cartographer says that he saw Alina glowing during the attack, and Alina attacks his bony ass in return. All in all, a typical conversation. They proceed to continue trying to determine whether or not she's a Sun Summoner. But then eventually, the Darkling cuts her with a knife and uses his power as an amplifier, something that increases Grisha power, to allow Alina to create light. Chapter 4. Ivan, one of the Darkling's upper Knicks, drags Alina to the Darkling's coach to get her into the royal palace with the other Grisha before the Fjerdan and Shuhan people start hunting her. Or, you could say, shoe-hunting her. She also meets Fedor, who tells her that her abilities might allow her to open up or even destroy the Shadowfold. On the trip, they run into a bunch of Fjerdans who attack them, even going as far as to attack Alina, who was supposed to be waiting in the coach. One Fjerdan nearly kills her, but then the Darkling saves her by slicing the dude in half with some Avada Kedavra type shit. This is the point where we can observe that he's a little shady, if you know what I mean. Chapter 5. They take a break to rest at an abandoned farm, and the Darkling answers some of Alina's questions. The Darkling says that his great-great-great-grandfather was evil, but not him. He's different, and # not like the other Darklings. Then they enter Asalta, and Alina is brought to her room. Chapter 6. We meet Genya, a very beautiful Grisha who's pretty critical of Alina, as well as just pretty, in general. but she ultimately helps her look presentable for a meeting with the king. Chapter 7. The Darkling leads her into the throne room of the Grand Palace, and they do a little demonstration of her powers. Thankfully, this time she doesn't get cut. Or the cut, for that matter. She then also meets the queen, who is very judgmental and bitchy, especially towards Genya, which is definitely a weird choice. Like, if there was a woman who had full control over the way I look, I would simply not piss her off. Common sense, you know? Then the Darkling permits her to wear a black kefta, which Genya says is a big deal because he doesn't permit others to wear black. It's a color reserved for him, apparently, which is just so fucking egotistical, dude. It would be like trying to copyright the Day of the Dead, an actual holiday, which I'm sure no one has ever done before, right? Anyways, Alina ends up deciding to go with blue to avoid attracting any more attention. Chapter 8. Alina meets Maria and Nadia, who are snobby and so proud that they sit beside the Darkling, despite him neglecting to even turn up to breakfast. Genya gives her a tour around the palace, including my favorite part, the library. Unexpected, I know. We also get to see the fabricator workshops, where we meet David, the guy that Genya seems to like. He doesn't pay much attention to her though. Then, Alina goes to a small stone hut and meets Bagra, an amplifier, just like the Darkling, who seems very harsh. Maybe she should have focused on amplifying her relationship to certain family members. Then none of them would be in this mess. But more on that later. Chapter 9. Alina has to go to combat training, held by a rather tough dude called Botkin. On her way there, she notices the apparatus stalking her creepily in the shadows, crawling around and overall just really living up to the rat part of his name. Botkin ends up being very harsh on her. What did she expect, really? The man's name literally shows that he is kinning a robot, and I wouldn't exactly call robots the most friendly beings. Then, Yvonne brings her to the Darkling, who asks about Mal, to which Alina tells him that Mal is the best tracker ever. Maybe the Darkling was interested because he figured that, with such a profession, Mal might be able to teach him a thing or two about railing. Chapter 10. Bagra and Botkin continue to torture her with difficult training. The Darkling wasn't spending any time with her though, which made Alina think that he was disappointed in her. One afternoon, Alina is approached by the apparat, and he tells her to come to him, a self-proclaimed spiritual advisor, if she's in distress. He also gives her a gift of a book and tells her she will suffer more, giving off major Trelawney vibes. Chapter 11. Alina meets Zoya, who everyone believes to be the epitome of perfection, since she's a beautiful, skilled fighter. She's pretty patronizing towards Alina though, but then Botkin orders Zoya to help Alina with fighting, and Alina, surprisingly enough, ends up winning. Zoya must have gotten really beat up, to the point of feeling sore, since that's reflected in her attitude when she uses magic to throw her against a wall, which is totally against Botkin's rules, so he yells at her quite a bit. Apparently, Zoya only does this because she's jealous of Alina being favored by the Darkling. But this doesn't seem to be the best move, seeing as she was later sent to the Darkling and he reduces Zoya to tears. While Alina is in the infirmary, the apparatus shows up and lets her know that people are praying to her, the Sun Summoner, and that faith is powerful enough to topple kings, and even Darklings. This kind of hints that she might use the faith in the future to do just that, but I haven't read the other books yet, no spoilers, by the way, so I don't know. Then Genya visits her in the morning, and Alina asks her to track Mal down, since he hadn't been replying to her letters. Wow. All this time, I thought he was supposed to be the one with the job of being a tracker. Chapter 12. When Alina heads to Bagra's the next day, she finds her arguing with the Darkling. Apparently, the Darkling had decided to get Alina a very strong amplifier, antlers from Morozova's stag, some ancient powerful white deer that had been sighted recently. But Bagra insists that these deer are not real. Bagra later gets angry that Alina isn't really trying anymore, but rather placated by the idea that all she has to do is wait for the deer. Genya informs Alina that Mal was safe and healthy, which upsets Alina because she worries that he would forget her. Alina finally manages to create light, because she feels as if Mal has given up on her, and she'd only ever held her power in in hopes that she might be allowed to return to him if she was deemed useless. Bagra is pleased that her power is working again, but I'm not. I think this is kind of a badly executed plot point, because why would the Grisha test in the prologue not include an amplifier? And if it did, well, her experience with the Darkling proves that they do work on her. If anyone has an explanation for that in the comments, or if I'm just wrong and that was obvious, please let me know. Chapter 13. Alina begins to feel better. When she first got to the palace, she was pretty weak and couldn't really fight or cast light, but now, after casting her first beam, it's getting better. Botkin, after seeing her improvement, gives her a knife made of Grisha steel, which I presume means that any Grisha can steal it, so Alina's gonna have to watch out. The Darkling sees her improvement too, and Bagra insists that she doesn't need the stag. Rather, just a regular amplifier and she'll be fine. The Darkling takes Alina aside to talk to her alone, and ends up kissing her, which surprises her, as well as me. I'm pretty upset that the Darkling is a love interest because of the huge age difference, huge power imbalance, and just the vibe of their relationship, which doesn't feel right. Chapter 14. Alina prepares for a winter fete held by the king and queen, supposedly the biggest event of the season. The Darkling thinks it's a waste of time, but he still gives Alina a black kefta to wear to set her apart. At the fete, the Grisha give performances of their powers, and Alina shows the entire ballroom what she can do by putting on a light show, accompanied by the Darkling's swirling shadows. Afterwards, the Darkling brings her into an empty room, and they kiss, of course. After they're interrupted, and the Darkling decides he needs to leave, he asks if he can go to her room that night, despite being like 500 years old and Alina probably being closer to her teens. Alina doesn't answer though, she can't make up her mind. She goes back to the party and talks to people for a little while longer, before trying to go to bed, but in the process sees a group of soldiers that includes Mal. She notices something is off with him. He seems unhappy. Il a l'air mal et fâché, excuse my French, and Alina mistakes that for him having better things to do, when in fact he was bitter that he came on the trek for the stag out of worry about Alina, but then saw Alina safe and sound, dancing and flirting like a princess. So I guess you could say he was upset about going stag, in more ways than one. He also apparently didn't get any of the letters she sent, since he'd been moving around a lot, trying to get the stag for the Darkling. Mal observes how Alina wears his symbol and color, and how the Darkling looks at her, and states that the Darkling owns you, which of course upsets her. Chapter 15. Bagra knocks on Alina's door and brings her to a hidden room. Bagra informs her that she must run away to avoid becoming a slave, to allow the Darkling to use the fold as a weapon by expanding it. I guess we now know that he's a grower, not a shower, as Alina would have found out if she hadn't run away. Also, he was the Black Heretic who created the fold hundreds of years ago, not his ancestor. Then, Bagra reveals her ability to create shadow, and Alina realizes that she's his mother, which came as a total surprise to me, honestly. The Darkling's plan was apparently to use Alina's light to keep the Volcra at bay, since they are the only thing keeping the Darkling from using the fold. And if the Darkling killed Morozova's stag and placed it around her neck, he would have had complete control over her. Good thing that didn't happen, eh? Chapter 16. Bagra sends her away to disappear. She does this because she loves him, her son, and to stop him before he goes beyond the point of no redemption. She said she'd post a servant at Alina's door that morning to claim that she was ill, but Alina informs her that the Darkling might go to her room that night. Something that Bagra probably didn't want to know about her son, even if it was useful and relevant. Alina gets into a wagon, occupied by a theater group. Being among theater kids would help with disappearing into the woods, I suppose. And she makes it to a town outside of Asalta. She keeps traveling and stumbles upon a church one morning where people are praying for the Sun Summoner, which is her, of course. This upsets her because she realizes that people are depending on her, and that they need her, and she's just up and left. At another town, she runs into a group of soldiers who seem to be looking for her, but who hadn't noticed her. But later that night, she gets grabbed by a creepy man who tries to take her into a shadowy alley, and so she creates light in order to blind him. Not sure how much damage that's done, though. He seemed to already be rather blind to the fact that she didn't want to go with him. Someone sees them, though, and the man says that she blinded him, so Alina gets found out. She ends up having to run away from a group of soldiers, and manages to escape via the lake until she is found by Mal. He informs her that he doesn't think they'll find the stag without him, so the two should be safe for now. Chapter 17. Mal and Alina exchange information. Mal makes a plan to go find the stag, since it might make Alina powerful enough to fight the Darkling. During their journey, the two come across a village that's celebrating the coming of spring at an event called Butter Week. Mal and Alina used to celebrate it all the time in their old village, and the nostalgia brings them to go celebrate with the village. They manage to nab a piece of food there, and I couldn't believe this, but it's not butter. They also get robbed, and Alina finds this hilarious since she thought they were going to be found out. The thieves had heard of a deserter from Mal's outpost, though, and threatened to turn him in. They get into a fight, and Alina and Mal beat them down enough to run away. After such a tense experience, Mal opens up a little more to her. Chapter 18. One night, Alina asks Mal to kill her if the Darkling finds her. Though he is very reluctant, he eventually agrees. Mal tells her of how 2 of his friends died in pursuit of the stag, which makes Alina feel bad because she thinks it's all her fault. Chapter 19. They have a kiss scene. Afterwards, they spot Morozova's stag. Alina is supposed to kill it, but she doesn't, because she wants to find another way. Suddenly, the Darkling comes out of nowhere and shoots the stag with an arrow. Alina tells Mal to kill her, but he can't either. The Darkling places the antler necklace, crafted by David, over her collarbones, allowing him to control her powers. Maybe he should have made sure that he had more Ozova power over her, as we come to find out in the next few chapters. Then, Mal is jailed, and the stag is burnt. Chapter 20. Alina tries to convince Ivan to turn against the Darkling, but he doesn't wanna. Apparently, no one had been told of Alina's disappearance out of fear that the Fjerdans would have killed her. Alina talks to Genya, who knew she had run, and informs her that Bagra had gone into seclusion, or been hurt by the Darkling. The king and queen were gone, too, and the apparat was ruling. David feels bad for making the necklace, and Alina tells Genya to tell him she forgives him. Chapter 21. Alina is brought to the Darkling, who mocks her for wanting to be with Mal, someone he sees as a lowly tracker. Maybe it's due to envy that as a tracker, he would have a much easier time finding a specific spot on a woman's body. Anyways, Alina argues back and forth with the Darkling, and it ends with the Darkling allowing her to visit Mal under the condition that he will be fed to the Volcra the following day. Alina thinks she'll probably be able to just wing it, so she accepts, and ends up having a nice, sweet scene with Mal, where they talk and reminisce and enjoy each other's company. Chapter 22. The day comes, and they go to the fold, with a big group of people to serve as witness. The Darkling takes control of Alina and forces her to light up the fold. They manage to get to the other side, near a village, and the Darkling kills a bunch of people at a dock, by enveloping them with darkness and allowing the Volcra to kill them. The ambassadors from Fjerda and Shuhan, brought as witnesses, are horrified, and the Darkling tells them that from now on, there's only the land inside the fold and outside of it, and there will be peace if he becomes dictator. I don't think this will succeed, though, since he seems to be more dick than tater. Then Ivan shoves Mal towards the Volcra, who try to kill him, so Alina punches Ivan and then somehow uses her powers to save Mal. She can apparently do this because her mercy for the stag bestowed power, and so she had as much power as the Darkling, who had killed it. I didn't particularly enjoy this part, since surely the Darkling would have known about that, being as old and powerful as he is. Surely someone else would have spared an animal and received that power already. But then Alina also manages to use the cut, the magical way of killing people that only she and the Darkling can use, and she uses it to threaten the Darkling. Alina uses the light to escape with Mal, leaving everyone else to die in the dark. They run far, far away, and burn the kefta in favor of clothes that aren't black. In the epilogue, we see them on a ship, watching for another ship with black sails. They heard that the apparat had disappeared, and that the 2 armies, the Grisha one that guards the palace and the one of regular people, might go to war with each other, and that the Sun Summoner was dead. Nothing about the Darkling, though. Okay, now, let's get into my final thoughts. The question I asked in the title was whether or not I feel like Shadow and Bone is overrated. As far as I've seen online, people seem to really love it. And don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it too. I just think that it is a little bit overrated. and that all the raving reviews aren't quite accurate. The book felt more like a 3 out of 5 than a 5 out of 5. Here's why. First of all, I don't particularly like the romantic relationships between certain characters. The friendships are great, they're fun, and all the characters have pretty solid personalities. But the romances and the love triangle? I personally found it to be really boring. The first one was Mal and Alina, and I think they worked much better as friends. Then there was Alina and the Darkling, and I think that the age difference and power imbalance between the two was just really weird. On the subject of the Darkling though, I wanted to talk about his role as the villain in the story. Apart from the romance, I think that his character is really well done. It's quite realistic. There are a lot of people like Yvonne who agree with his thoughts, who are willing to do whatever it takes to achieve his goal, and who fervently support him as a dictator. But there's also the other side, which opposes him pretty strongly as well. This side doesn't only include Alina and Mal, but also includes all the civilians of Ravka who had family members or neighbors killed by the Darkling. It includes the Fjerdans and Shuhan, who were obviously angry about the Darkling's tyranny. And it includes everyone else who had even a shred of common sense. Next, I want to bring up the world building, which I think is fantastic. I like the different kinds of Grisha and the sciences they can manipulate, even though I think it's basically the same thing as magic. I also like the world. The map at the beginning looks really cool, the political tensions between the different countries is interesting, and the military, the first and second army, is a rather logical system too. But I find the rest of the book to be a little bland. Nothing else that's noteworthy really happens, and the book is slower than I would have liked. Hence, my 3 out of 5 star rating. Even though I am a booktube channel, I've also been thinking that maybe I could watch the TV show and compare it to the book. Please let me know if that's something you would like to see. Otherwise, I hope you have enjoyed the video. If you have, feel free to click on another one of my videos or the subscribe button that should be floating around right about now. Bye!